Hello and welcome to Secrets of the Oklahoma Octopus. A few weeks ago, I uploaded a new entry in our Cryptid By State series where it was focused on Oklahoma. While researching what type of creatures are said to roam about the landscape of that state, I obviously took note of one of the area's most well-known and popular cryptids, which was the Oklahoma Octopus. This being was so popular that it almost was akin to thinking of the Jersey Devil being tied to New Jersey, the Mothman to West Virginia, or even the Dogman of Michigan. Yet, the more I looked into this being, the more I realized that things appeared amiss. So I decided then and there that before closing the book on Oklahoma, we first need to delve into the secrets behind the state's supposedly most famous cryptid. So join me as I tell you the lore and then follow that up with what I uncovered. While swimming in murky waters, many fear the thought of some type of unseen monster just waiting in the silt to attack. This can take many forms. For instance, and in my case, the idea of a shark is ever present in my mind, but many others fear the thought of a tentacle wrapping around their leg and pulling them under. This all seems crazy to think about until you feel a fish or some aquatic plant brush up against your leg. Stories of such beasts of the water are found all over the world, and it is also said to be the case in Oklahoma. According to lore, there is a massive creature of nightmares that is said to make its home in the lakes of the state. For over 200 years, legends describe a creature that is called a demon and is the size of a horse or jeep, has leathery reddish-brown skin, long tentacles, and it has an apparent taste for human flesh. Most famously, this being seems to reside in Lake Ulaga, Lake Thunderbird, and Ten Killer Fairy Lake, which is commonly simplified to Lake Ten Killer. I must admit that a lake with that name certainly would be an interesting place to find a killer octopus, although the history behind it states that it was called such after a Cherokee family's name of Ten Killer, who owned the land that the lake resides on, and even provided ferry rides before the lake was constructed. Anyway, back to our story. While there is very little in the way of physical proof of this creature being real, what is very real is the fact that there are many cases of swimmers going missing. After in-depth searching, very few bodies are ever recovered, which leads many to believe that the octopus had been involved. While this could easily be written off, I did find some articles that say that there were as many as 4 drownings in only 3 days. A number like that makes one take notice of the fact that the number does seem incredibly high for just a short period of time. According to the Army Corps of Engineers in Tulsa, they stated that from 2001 up until 2008, drowning numbers had steadily increased. Going a step farther, they remarkably noted that from 2007 to 2008, those numbers increased by 40%. What makes this even stranger is the claims that when some bodies are recovered, they are found with large sucker-like injuries all over the skin. There is a report from 1993 where a young girl was on vacation with her family at a cabin near Lake Ten Killer. While on this trip, she was out in the water swimming with her friend when she suddenly felt what she thought was a fish brush against her leg. The girl screamed out, and her friend started laughing at her. Only seconds later, her friend was grabbed by some unseen force and pulled under the water. The friend never returned to the surface, and after an intense search, nothing was ever found. To this day, that woman will not step foot near the water. Adding to this, there is a report from 2007 where a boy who was vacationing with his family had decided to go out for a swim. As he headed out into the water, he quickly realized he was having trouble staying afloat. He screamed out for his family, and at one point, he yelled that it felt like something was trying to drag him under. Before long, the boy vanished from sight. A search party went in to find the boy, but again, nothing was ever found. That is most all the information that is given for the lore behind this creature. So now we will look at what evidence we have to go off of. First off, I must state that, unlike most cryptids, this creature doesn't have any photographs or video of it. All that we have to go by are the stories that have been spread. Let me start off with the point that many mention. Oklahoma may have many lakes, but many of which are not natural at all. In fact, there are said to be 200 of such that are all man-made. This figure includes the previously named Lake Ulaga, Lake Thunderbird, and Lake Tenkiller. I will leave that there for a second, since the other part of the legend states that the octopus has been talked about in native lore for over 200 years. This is a bit troublesome, since Tenkiller Lake was constructed between 1947 and 1952, Lake Ulaga was built in 1950 and completed in 1963, Lake Thunderbird, which is nicknamed Dirty Bird, was constructed between 1962 and 1965. So knowing this information, it does make it hard to invest in the idea that a legend about a lake octopus was around before the lakes even existed. Now you may assume, like myself, that maybe the creature lived in the rivers that feed the lakes. This is somewhat unlikely, since there aren't any known species of octopus that can live, let alone thrive, in fresh water. Well, let's assume that one managed to. Lake Thunderbird is fed by the Little River, which primarily consists of swamplands with alligators in them. That wouldn't bode well for an octopus trying to make it to a lake. Lake Ulaga is fed by the Verdigris Lake, which is very silty and muddy, and I would assume it would be difficult for an ocean-based creature to adapt to. Now, Tenkiller is fed by the Illinois River, which would be a possibility, but it has a long history of having high phosphorus content in the water. Let me also mention that with showing you this map of the lakes in Oklahoma and the relation of the three in the story, it seems odd that none of the other bodies of waters have had any issues with a man-eating octopus. Jumping back to the Native American lore, within that story, no one can pinpoint what tribe actually described this creature. Although at one point I did find mention from an article that I can no longer seem to locate that it may have been from the Cherokee. However, even within this lore, they did mention a demon, but the description was fairly different. It was described as being a white-colored leech-like creature that would drag unsuspecting victims into the water with its tentacles. You may think this could describe the same beast, but this being was known to be a supernatural entity that could change its shape. While I always appreciate Native American lore, we must keep in mind that if these stories were from over 200 years ago, it would have been about a river rather than a lake. Not to mention, with how frequently the native people were dispersed from the state, this story may not have even been about Oklahoma. It is at this point that we must note that many locals that I have talked to from Oklahoma were fairly unaware of this creature existing. Now, I won't say that is particularly damning information, since I have found, with making my Cryptid by State series, that sometimes cryptid sightings are only found in localized areas. Much like when I talked about Pennsylvania. Around my home, we hear about Bigfoot, alien big cats, and recently dogmen. But the more you go north, there are sightings of thunderbirds. Around here, no one has heard of or seen a thunderbird in Pennsylvania. Let's not forget that apparently my state's cryptid is a squonk, which is basically a pig that cries a lot and can dissolve into a puddle of tears if someone tries to catch it. Granted, this was a lumberjack tale, but I have yet to find one Pennsylvanian that I have talked to that has ever heard of this supposedly famous creature. So, in relation, the same could be said for the octopus. Ever fueling the fire behind this cryptid was a program from the Animal Planet called Lost Tapes that debuted their version of this story on January 13th, 2009. In this fictionalized found footage program, supposedly based on real events, it depicts 5 teenagers who are all slowly picked off by the octopus, up until only 2 remain. While I personally love this show, it seems to be the common point where a lot of people gain their information from. In fact, I was just cross-referencing an article I found from a source I fairly trust, and in it, full names were given of victims from this creature. You know how much I appreciate detailed information, so I started looking into this. Sadly, I found that every person named in that article as a credible story were the exact names given in the Lost Tapes program. Foiled again. Every word of the article was spot on with the plot of that episode, down to the injuries the survivors were claimed to have. While most sources run directly back to the Lost Tapes, I'm not one to give them full credit for starting the story. We must ask, though, where is that point? Much like the sightings, the details are scarce. I have found notes that claim that an article emerged around Halloween in 2006 from a travel magazine that perpetuated the story. In later interviews, that writer admitted to the hoax and even stated that he had never even been to Oklahoma. I also saw reports that apparently after the lakes were built, the Army Corps of Engineers remarked how they resembled the shape of an octopus. I admit that at the time of recording this, I can't find those sources again, but I did read them about 2 weeks ago, and I promise to give them to you whenever I uncover them again. Now, there are claims that the many deaths involved in the lake are the result of swimmers having a bit too much to drink, but, as usual, I pose other possibilities. While I personally don't believe in the octopus due to the information, I can say that something is going on at their lakes. Some have stated that the sucker marks found on recovered bodies could be the result of lampreys, which are found in the water, and they are making a meal of whatever they could find. Although it should be noted that on rare occasions, they have been known to actually attack humans. Many point to the giant catfish that are living in the lakes. Their whiskers could feel like a tentacle, and again, they have been known to attack humans. While many try to debunk this fact, a similar story to the Oklahoma Octopus emerged from Vaal River in South Africa. In those stories, known strong swimmers would go missing and nothing would ever be found. It turned out that the large catfish known as barbels would drag a swimmer down. Now, I am not saying these are man-hunting fish, but they could possibly mistake a human for a meal and drown them in the process. I understand the unlikeliness of this option, but I try to explore every avenue, especially when there is a similar story from a totally different location that claims it was a catfish. Now, what makes this water creature odd is that some people claim that what they saw wasn't an octopus at all. In fact, in many sightings, they state that what they saw almost resembled a giant crab. There are freshwater crabs, so this could be possible, but who knows? I do want to mention that there are many articles claiming that people have fished small octopuses out of the water. In most of those claims, they were either pets someone released and were barely alive due to the fresh water, or were already dead and planted as a prank. Although some state that this isn't the case and the whole incident is being covered up. At this point, I feel I must play devil's advocate. It is worth mentioning that an explanation behind the octopus making a home in a man-made lake is available. It is said that the original story behind the Native American lore was not of an actual creature, but an evil spirit that is taking the form of an octopus. In this, it originated in underground springs, and once the lakes were constructed, it was able to emerge into the water. As such, the legends state that the land was viewed as being cursed. I have also seen many reports from people stating that they suddenly get this eerie feeling when they get out into deeper waters. Some describe it as feeling like being watched, or that something bad is about to happen. Mind you, this is even while they are in a canoe and not just swimming. So, there is that. I know I can simply say that regardless if there is an octopus or not, you won't find me in those waters. As I end this, I must state again that this video isn't intended to debunk the cryptid. As usual, I do respect people's sightings, and I can only go off of what information I have, since I personally haven't stepped foot into the state myself. I made this video to give you all the information, since a lot of articles really sway one way or the other, but at the same time, miss important details. At the end of the day, even though I don't think this creature exists, it is ultimately up to you, and I most certainly respect that. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Also, it would be greatly appreciated if you share my videos with someone you know who may enjoy this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!